Morning, everybody. Thanks for getting up on Saturday. Appreciate it. So I thought we would start. I think you saw the brief outline. I realize it's very brief, but those are the 5 points I'm going to cover. And I thought I would start with just a description of what is career counseling. And you would, or what is a career counselor? You might think that all career counselors would agree on this definition, but it's actually a little more, we don't all agree. I'll just put it that way on what a career counselor is. So the definition that I use is the traditional definition, which is that the goal of a career counselor is to assist people in making informed career decisions. And that means helping with the process of self-assessment, career exploration, and then implementation of a career goal. The age range can vary by setting and by the counselor's experience. So I'm a counselor in private practice. I would say 99% of my clients are adults. That's a pretty wide range. So every once in a while, I will get a college student. Sometimes not all my clients have college degrees, but most of them do have college degrees. And then the age range can go anywhere from 20 to 65. Although I did have a client once who was 70 who wanted to change careers. So, but the traditional, so the most likely group would be people in their 20s who either are just looking to start their careers or who have been in the job market a while but are having trouble finding their way. And then the second largest group would be people in their 30s and 40s who have had careers but who want to do something different. So those are at the most likely range for a career counselor like me in private practice. When we get to the second point about where career counselors work, I'll talk to you about the different populations that different career counselors see. So just to come back to what I said right at the beginning about where our career counselors not agreeing. I've been in a heated debate with many of my career counseling peers across the country and even in other countries about whether our job is to help people find their passion or not. A lot of career counselors think that that is our job. I don't agree with that being our job. I think if that's what a client is looking for and that's what they want to help with, then it becomes our job. But not every client is looking for that, and it's not in my opinion, it's not necessarily the most appropriate paradigm for all clients. And the reason is that there's a couple of reasons for that, but one reason for that is that the majority of clients that we see or that I see don't actually have a pre-existing passion to follow. And so what happens is they bought into this idea that they need to find their passion, and then they're like scouring their psyches, honestly, to find this passion. But the truth is they don't have it, because passion is often comes from experience. And sometimes the thing that you end up being the most passionate about comes through a chance encounter. And it's not something that you planned from the time that you were 6 years old or 10 years old. So, and along with the idea of following your passion, I see with my clients, they're kind of waiting for some light bulb to go off in their head that you're going to say, well, this is your passion and this is what you should pursue. And there is no light bulb, because the thing that might make the most sense for them is something they don't know anything about or haven't experienced yet. And so one of the things that I talk to my clients about is the role of passion, or the place and passion of passion in a career choice, and that there's nothing subpar, I would say, or lesser about choosing a career that you find satisfying and meaningful, even if it's not your passion. So this is where I come back. I think my approach tends to be more based on rational rather than like this intense emotion, even though I think that emotion is important. So I see the goal is to help people make informed career decisions. And if for them, the informed career decision is how to monetize their passion, that's what we'll work on. But if it's something else, if it's, if their passion is their family and the thing they really want is to be able to support their family, then that's what we'll work on. So I don't decide in advance what my clients should make their priorities. My job is to help them figure out what their priorities are and how to meet them. So having said that, I'm going to describe the process to you that I described to them. So when people first call, most people come in on a referral, but some people just do a Google search and they find my website, or they see something that I've written. And most of the time, what they're looking for is someone to, like, a sounding board for someone to help them figure out what would work best for them, like what career makes the most sense or what career change makes the most sense. But because of my training in psychology, there's also a subset of clients who come in who recognize that there's some theme, I would say, a repetitive pattern, that they're choosing the wrong jobs, or they're getting into conflicts with their coworkers, and they're constantly getting fired. And so there's that group that understand or are looking for the intersection of career counseling and psychotherapy that would be unique to career counselors who have the kind of training that I have. And there are a number of us who are trained to also be therapists or psychologists to deal with those issues. If you're a career counselor who doesn't come out of a mental health background, that might be a cue that you want to possibly refer that person to a therapist, like right away, because you're dealing with a psychological or a mental issue. So that's sort of my pre-screening of my clients, basically, to make sure that I can provide the kind of service that they're looking for, or what they're looking for. Then what I would tell them, so I don't have a kind of a preset, I don't have a structure where on the first session, this is what you do, the second session, this is what you do, the third session. But there are counselors who do have that, right? So there are counselors who take a very structured approach, and they give you the framework and they tell you what you're going to be doing each week. The approach that I use is a little more customized to the individual. And I feel like this is a luxury that career counselors in private practice have that may not be available to people who are working with in a setting with a larger volume of clients. So for me, the process is more organic, that we decide as we go along. Like, I know the things we need to cover, but they don't have to be covered in any particular order. So what I tell them is that what my emphasis is going to be is if they decide to work with me on the first session, I would ask them to walk me through their history of career decisions, their current situation, and then how far they've gotten in terms of thinking about next steps. And then during that meeting, my goal is to make an assessment of what kind of information and assistance they need to make and implement a decision, and then put together an individualized plan for them. So with the overarching goal, I would say to look at how they make decisions, what has worked for them, what has not worked for them, and how to improve their career decision-making process so that they can learn from their experience and then build on their experience. So the three pieces of the process, like if you read about career counseling in the books, they'll tell you these are discrete stages, but in fact, they're not discrete stages. So it's a very interactive and dynamic process. And so everything is kind of happening at the same time. But we start ideally with a self-assessment process, and that would be evaluating interests, abilities, values, motivations, needs, priorities, personality preference, etc. And one of the things that I'm looking for when they tell their story is how much insight or awareness do they have into their own inner life, I would say, or what capacity do they have to make sense of the experiences that they have had, and who in their world has been influencing their decisions and what has worked and not worked in terms of those influencers. So what I find is that sometimes people are very insightful about their own experience and have pretty good insight into their own strengths and weaknesses. And so with that population, you can feel more comfortable, or I feel more comfortable using a little bit more of a traditional counseling approach that doesn't necessarily require like testing, for example. So I think a lot of people, when they think about career counseling, they think of it like you give people a bunch of tests, and then you look at the test results and you tell them, based on the test results, these are the career fields that make the most sense for you. That actually, if that's your view of what career counseling is, that's how career counseling started. So that is called the trait and factor theory of career counseling. And it was developed by Frank Parsons in like the early 1900s. And it was kind of ushered in by the Industrial Revolution. And when there was a migration from rural and agricultural into the cities. And so it was actually I think it was a government program. And the idea was to test people and then figure out, based on their interests and their abilities, what jobs would make the most sense for them. So that's the original way in which career counseling was structured. And the assessment tool that goes along with that is called the Strong Interest Inventory. So I would tell you, I sometimes still use the Strong Interest Inventory, but probably 10% of my clients, maybe less. So the people I would use this with, so when I think about testing in general, one of the things with different individuals is some people are not able to really articulate that they don't have a framework to discuss themselves or an understanding of the world of work. So a lot of times what people will say to me, what they're looking for is they don't know what's out there. Out there meaning outside of their experience. So they know what their parents did or do. They know what their friends do. They may think they know what their teachers do. They probably don't, but they may think they do. But their world is limited. And so what they're looking for is a better understanding of the workplace itself and not as much self-assessment. But you cannot skip over the self-assessment when you're looking at the career exploration, because you have to tie the two together. So when people have a very limited ability to articulate their experience, or they just don't have very much experience and a very limited understanding of the world of work, I would say that those could be good candidates for testing. I will sometimes use the strong, but the challenge with the strong, we'll come back to it in the assessment, but the challenge with the strong is that the job market is so dynamic that those categories that they use cannot possibly capture the complexity of the job market. So, it's maybe a good way to start, but it's only a beginning. And then there are other tests, like personality tests. Some counselors use aptitude testing as well. I found that the aptitude tests are a bit of a weak link for the same reason. So the aptitude tests are kind of like what you have been taking in school all these years, the ACTs, the SATs, and then they're telling you, they're giving you an IQ score, and they're giving you your verbal abilities, your reading comprehension, your numerical aptitude, maybe spatial, but that doesn't tell you a lot about what they would actually be good at in the real world of work. And so I tend to use more of a narrative approach to understand what they've been doing, like in school, work, extracurricular, etc., that would help us identify what their interests and their skills are. So this is a very rough estimate, but I'd say testing with 10 to 20% of my clients, and it's not always the same test. And the other piece of the self-assessment, a lot of it is just talking through their what they know and what they're thinking about and what they've learned from their own experience. And then I do give homework assignments. So I have several exercises, I would say, that I've developed through the years that I find are helpful. And some books, and I'll recommend some books. So what we're looking for is to create a process in which they can develop a better understanding of their skills, interest, personality, etc. And then begin to develop what I would call a working hypothesis of possible career fields or roles that make sense for them. So this is where around the developing the working hypothesis, I think this is one place where career counseling tends to deviate quite a bit from more traditional counseling paradigms, because I love the Rogerian idea, which you've probably learned, the client-centered approach, where with the idea that the clients have all of the answers within themselves, and that your goal is to listen and be authentic and create a safe space for that information to come out. And I believe all of that is important, but my clients do not have all the answers within themselves. That's why they're coming to me, right? Because they're saying, what's out there? I really don't know about the job market. And all the self-assessment in the world isn't going to give them that information about possible fields or industries or roles, because they never heard of it. And even just telling them, oh, this sounds like you'd be good for training and development. If you're expecting some light bulb to go off, you're not going to get it, because they don't even know what it is, right? There's no light bulb. If someone says, I think you'd love so-and-so, but you have no idea who so-and-so is, right? So you're okay, why? Right. And so in that working hypothesis, it's pretty dynamic. I'll say what sounds like you might like this field, and here's why I'm thinking this, and then we'll talk about it, and we'll tweak it, and we'll come up with maybe 5 or 6 possibilities. And then And then there's a research. So then this is the second piece after the self-assessment is the career exploration. And the career exploration is looking at our working hypothesis and figuring out like how to get more information about the field or the role to see if it would be right for you. So I suggest what you will recognize as both primary and secondary research. So the secondary research is just reading about the field and learning about it and what's involved. And then the primary is talking to people who work in the field or the role about what it's really like. So, and one of the things I'll say is that we'll come up with a short list, and I'll say, okay, look at the list. Which one do you find the most interesting and exciting? So what would you be the most motivated to pursue or to learn about, not to pursue, but to learn about? And then we organize the priorities by their enthusiasm, I would say, or interest in each field, because I don't want them to feel like this is just a huge chore that they don't want to do. I want them to think they could be learning something really interesting, that they might be finding the thing that would be really good for them. So we do it. So this is, I may not be like a follow your passion person, but I am a follow your energy person. And so I feel like if you can get excited about something and you're naturally motivated to want to learn more about it, let's start there. And so we develop a research plan for them to learn more about the fields, and then we set our time according to the task. So I know with a lot of in a lot of counseling or therapy models, people tend to meet every week. But in the career counseling, I found that often some people benefit from every week, but it's often every 2 weeks. And the reason that it's every 2 weeks is because they have a lot to do in between. So at the end of each, and most of these people are working, and they have a lot of people have families. And so I'm trying to work with their schedules and what works for them. And so I ask them, you know, when do you want to meet again? What do you think would make the most sense? And if they say a week, some people say like, let's do it tomorrow, right? Then I know like they want to go, like they're ready to go. But some people, most people I would say 2 weeks. And so I tend to see them every 2 weeks. And because of that, I would tell you, I take really good notes, because 2 weeks is a long time, especially when you've only seen someone once. And so I want to make sure that I remember everything we talked about and what their assignments were. And because sometimes they'll come in and they'll say, so what do we do next? And like, I'd better know. Right? Not like, who are you? I don't remember who you are. So then there's the career exploration, but sometimes what we find with the career exploration is then you circle back to the self-assessment, right? Because they'll say, well, you know, I thought that I would like this, but when I'm talking to people, I realized like, I don't want to know that much about people or whatever. I don't want to know their motivations, or this field is too money oriented. I don't want to just be focused on that. So then we'll look at our list and we'll see what stays and what goes, or if we have to add something or eliminate something. Every so often, not a lot, but every so often, people will find that what they have actually makes more sense for them than what their alternatives are. So I tell them coming in, so we know what you have, like, let's put that let's put that to the side and explore what the other options are, and then let's compare what you found out to what you have and see if we've identified anything that is better for you. So sometimes people end up not making the change, but the other reason they don't make the change is because it's harder than they thought it would be. So especially not for young people, I would say, but more for people who have had successful careers and who have worked up they have a lot of experience and they have worked up to a certain income level. And the thing they will most often say is they don't want to start over. So at the bottom, because they've already done that. So the thing that we look at with those people are what we call transferable skills. So we look at what are the skills and experiences that they have and how can they translate into other fields so they can make a lateral. And then so the goal is like not to take a huge hit on income or on level. But to try to do lateral, sometimes you go down one level, but we try not to do that because people get discouraged by that if they have to do that. So then once we've identified the career exploration and they've identified what they feel they want to go for after, then we do what I call a gap analysis. So the gap analysis is basically we look at actual job descriptions in the field and we say, okay, here's what you've done. Here's what you have. Here's what these jobs are looking for. What are you missing? Right. So what do you need to do to close that gap so that you're marketable in this field? So sometimes people have everything they need and they don't have to do, they don't, all they have to do is like rewrite their resume, job search, etc. But sometimes they need some training or certification or volunteer work to fill in the gap. And the other thing we see sometimes with career changers is it ends up being like a two-step process. So if they have a good relationship with the organization that they work for, they may change roles within the organization, even though they want to leave the organization. It's easier to change roles within the organization. And then once they get experience in the new role, then they leave possibly for another industry. So it's a way it's a way to position the reentry process that makes it doable, right? So that's in the implementation, that's what we're looking at is what's the path, what are the obstacles in the way, what's the path to get there, and then how do you implement? And then I think most career counselors will tell you that we are job search coaches. So we do help people write their resumes, develop job search strategies, practice interviewing, develop networking strategies, all of that piece. So having said that, now I will tell you, career counseling is a short-term counseling process. I know it didn't sound like it, but it's that traditional career counseling is 5 to 8 sessions. So, but some people stay longer and some people just come for 1 or 2 sessions. So it just depends on what they need. And when it comes to the job search, some people need a lot more than other people do. Some people say, I know how to look for a job. I don't need help with that. And then we're done. And other people are like, I have no idea. I don't have a resume. I have no idea how to do this. I hate networking. That's sort of common. I hate networking. And interviewing. So we go through, I see the job search piece as that some people don't realize that a job search has skills that can be learned, but you have to practice in order to learn. And so I approach it like troubleshooting. Like you look at each step of the job search and you see where people are getting stuck. And at the point where they're getting stuck, they're sending out their resume, but they're not getting responses. So is it the resume or is it the strategy that they're using? So if they're only applying to online postings, that would have a lot to do with why they're not getting response, because it's just a low percentage success rate. And so we are constantly troubleshooting the strategy to see, and you see, so one of the things with the career counseling is we're looking for results, right? And so it's not, and the results are kind of tangible. So at the end, you have a resume, you know how to do a job search. you may hate networking, but we find a way to do it. So that we're actually building what I consider lifelong career skills. So that once you know how to do this, you don't have to keep going back to a career counselor when you make a change. You know how to, at least you know how to do the job search, and you have a framework for making the career decisions. So that's the process. That took me longer to explain than I thought it would, but that is the process. So the next question is, where do career counselors work? So you know, right, already that I'm a career counselor in private practice. A lot of us do work in private practice, but we're also in a bunch of other settings. So you can find career counselors in government agencies, in nonprofits, in corporations. What am I forgetting? In colleges and universities, and in, I guess you would call them, they're called career marketing firms. So they're not exactly private practices, but they're group career services. The services that people provide and the training that they have, that the counselors have, is determined by their own experience and by the venue that they work in. So when you were doing your homework assignments, you might have discovered that a lot of the people that you were talking to were either career or life coaches rather than career counselors. And the reason for this is that the career counseling profession, I want to say this, you can call yourself a career counselor without having any professional license or certification, but the career coaches tend to be uncomfortable calling themselves counselors, and so they call themselves coaches. And sometimes the counselors call themselves coaches because the clients like coaching rather than counseling. There is the degrees that people have and the training that they have is partly determined by the venue that they work in. So if you are a career counselor and you're working in colleges and universities, you'll be in the career services office. And if you've ever been to the career services office, you'll find that there's like one counselor for hundreds and hundreds of students. And so there's not too much counseling going on because they're too understaffed to do the counseling. So a lot of those people are coming out of students have degrees in student services or in higher ed student services. And a lot of the work they do, they have testing, they work with employers to bring in employers. They help write resumes. They work with the nuts and bolts, but less on the counseling end, just because it's so hard to make the numbers work. If they're in government agencies, nonprofits, it really depends. I did my training at the Jewish Vocational Service, and they do more traditional career counseling. They have a whole staff of career counselors, and all of the counselors there have counseling degrees. But you will find that that's not always true of everywhere you go. So there is a certification, there is a national certification in career counseling, which you may have come across. It's called the NCCC, National Certified Career Counselor. And it's in order to, I don't actually have the certification because I never felt I needed it, but like if you have not been trained as a career counselor, but you have a degree in counseling, this would be a good way to go to get trained, because their requirements are that you have to have a master's degree in some counseling or mental health or clinical or counseling degree. And then there's courses, they require courses and then some training in order to become certified. And so they provide the courses and the classes, and I think that's that would be a good way to educate yourself if you're interested in actually doing this work. Because there are only a handful of schools that that have degrees in career counseling. I mean, there might be half a dozen in the country that where you can actually get a degree in career counseling. So if you, and that this is one of the reasons I think why people are coming from such disparate backgrounds, because there's not a lot of formal education. And you will find when I first got into the field, I found that a lot of the career counselors that I was talking to were self-taught and did not have any specific training, and they came from all different kinds of backgrounds. So one of the areas that I worked in for a while is called outplacement consulting. And I don't know if you came across this in your research, but outplacement consultants are people who are hired by corporations when they're laying people off to come in and help them figure out what their next steps are going to be and get a job. I worked on the group side of this, so I was doing group workshops in teaching people how to write resumes, job search strategy, etc. But at the executive level, they also have individual career coaches or counselors in outplacement. And you'll find that these people come from all different kinds of backgrounds. You have to have a graduate degree, but some people have MBAs. Some people worked in human resources. Some people are psychologists. It's all over the map. But with the population that they're working with, business experience can be very helpful. So the fact that some people have had business careers, I think the clients themselves find that credible because it means that the coach or the counselor they're talking to understands the business world that they're coming out of. So, but if you go into corporate, and you do find career counselors and coaches also in larger corporations, and I found that these people tend to be psychologists. So, or to be trained in counseling rather than through the business. They don't come up through the business side, they come up through the psychology side. I can't tell you why. I don't know why. But that's just been my experience. You find a lot of PhDs on this part of the career counseling in the corporations. Okay, moving on. I guess I should say one more thing about that. You may have come across the vocational rehab people. So vocational rehab, it's a slightly different field, but they also do career counseling. So the vocational rehab people are working with people who have disabilities. And their approach is much more cookie cutter, I'll say. So I know the framework they use. And I've seen a lot of the reports that they do. And so it's a very standardized process. So they have their traditional assessment instruments, including aptitude test. So they'll use a traditional aptitude or abilities test, and then they match people with different occupations, and they use the government data, the Dictionary of Occupational Titles from the Department of Labor, to match people with the actual occupations that they're doing. So they're kind of using the trade and factor approach with their clients. But one of the things they're looking at is what's the impact. They look at medical records and what's the impact of the disability on the person's ability to work. What does that mean in terms of the changes that they're making? So, and these people, they have a different degree. So these are certified rehabilitation counselors. And they're basically working with people with disabilities. We sometimes work with people with disabilities, but I feel like it's a different field. Because of the approach is, I mean, I would never tell people to use a dictionary of occupational titles to choose a career, but that's the model, right? It's like this is the model, and like I know the reports. I've seen 100 of them, and they all kind of look the same. So, but I think they serve an important purpose, especially for people with disabilities, because that's who it's a disability model. Okay, the next question is the relationship between career counseling theory and practice. So when I first started working as a career counselor, I got my degree from Northwestern in counseling, and my specialization was in career counseling. But what I discovered is that the only reason that they really had a specialization in career counseling is because they needed it for accreditation. And so there was one practicum that they had with the Jewish Vocational Service. So that's what I did. And then there were two courses. One was in career counseling theory, and the other was in the testing and assessment. And that was basically it. So I wouldn't exactly call that, I don't know, that's not much of a specialization, I don't think, but that's what we had. And later on, I taught the course in career counseling theory. So I'm very conversant with the theories, but I've been practicing a long time, and I kept looking at the theories and saying, like, I don't understand what these career counseling theories have to do with what I do. I don't know how to use these. I didn't say that to my students, but I did say that to myself, hopefully to myself. And so then I started talking to other career counselors, and I'm like, what theories are you using? Like, I'm looking at all these theories, and I don't really understand how to use these theories in terms of what we do. And like the feedback I was getting is that they were using a book written by Richard Bowles called What Color is Your Parachute? Which was driving the academics crazy because it's just a popular career book. And then they were using another book that was written by Marcia Sinitar called Do What You Love, The Money Will Follow. And this is where all the passion people were coming from. So in the 60s and 70s, corporations started laying people off. This had never happened before. A lot of people were working with one company for life, and they expected to have job security for the rest of their life. And then these layoffs came mostly in the 80s, I would say. And it was like people didn't know what to do. It was like changed the whole paradigm. And then Marcia Sinitar came along with this idea. It was like, well, don't just be practical, like do what you love. And then like the money will follow. The money doesn't follow, by the way, automatically, but like some people learned that the hard way. The money didn't follow. But so the career counselors were like, they love this idea that do what you love, the money will follow, because then that like freed everybody up to help their clients find their passion. And this was a totally different way of thinking about the work. So, but I will say, in Marcia Sinitar's defense, the title doesn't mean what people think it means. So she didn't come up with that title. The publisher did, because they knew it would sell books. But when she says, do what you love, the money will follow, she didn't mean that you would automatically make money doing what you loved. What she meant is that the money would become less important if you really loved your work. But I think some of the people that were using the do what you love, the money will follow were doing it based on the title and hadn't actually read the book, because they were sort of misinterpreting what she meant. Because she herself was was a high-level publishing executive, and she decided to downsize her life and move to a small town to do consulting because she decided the money was less important. So that was the model, and she accidentally, I think, spawned a whole movement in the career counseling profession. So that's what people were using. And then the third thing that they were using is a book called, I think if you've seen, did you circulate the little bibliography, my little bibliography?
Yeah, that will be added after I upload this.
Okay. Okay, so there's a book on this little bibliography that's called Luck is No Accident. And this is actually based on an academic theory called planned happenstance. And the career counselors like this one because they can actually apply planned happenstance. So what had happened, if you're following my strange logic here, is that there's this huge disconnect between the academic theories and the actual practice of career counseling. So the academics were basically creating theories for each other. And the counselors are using popular psychology. So the academics are not happy about this because they have all these theories that they want the counselors to use, and the counselors are like, we don't know how to use this. So the planned happenstance, it was a professor named John Krumboltz. I think he was at Stanford, Princeton or Stanford. Anyway, he figured it out, and he wrote a book called Luck is No Accident that is the application of his planned happenstance theory. So a lot of career counselors like the planned happenstance, and one of the reasons they like it is because what Krumboltz figured out is like a lot of careers are built on and career choices are built on accidental discoveries. Like you sat down at someone at the coffee shop and they started talking and they're like, oh, we could use someone at our place that, knows how to do what you, or I like you, why don't you, come work for us? And that's how their careers, we call them accidental careerists. They fell into jobs that they built into careers. So and things happen all the time where something happens in your life, you're on one trajectory and something happens, your circumstances change, or something profound happens, it changes you. And then you make a change in something that you never anticipated you were going to do. So it wasn't planned. So like just in my own case, I was a high school English teacher, which was a default because I actually wanted to be a college professor. And I got talked out of it. And then I was considering law school, and I worked in a law firm, and then I realized that's too adversarial for me. And so for whatever reason, found a therapist who happened to be an analyst. I had no idea what an analyst was. And then I'm like, whoa, I'm going to be a therapist. So that's how I became a therapist. Then I got into graduate school and I'm like, this may not be for me. Right. And then I found the career counseling. I had an advisor who helped me with the career counseling because I had a background in business, and he thought it would be a better fit to put the business and psychology together. But there's no way I started out to be a career counselor. Right. And it was just like a bunch of different things happened that made this path possible. And I think it's not unusual to find careers like that. But I would tell you, I would not recommend this impulsive way of making career choices. Mine was totally impulsive, and I had no idea what I was getting into when I said I wanted to be a therapist. Like I liked that analysis, but like I am not well suited to long-term psychoanalysis therapy. That I'm like, I don't have the patience for this. And I had no idea. I just thought like, well, this is meaningful. All he's doing is listening and having meaningful conversations. It's hard to sit there for an hour and listen. Right? It's like, as you see, I'm driving you crazy. So, um, so anyway, in the planned happenstance, um, what Crumbold says is what you want to do is you want to look at that, what your interests and your values and the things that you care about. And then you want to intentionally put yourself in situations where you're interacting with people who share your interests and values, and then see what happens. So you're planning for luck, basically. But he's right. I think he's right. For some people, this really does work, right? And because you're engaged and you're talking to people and you're learning about things that are within the realm of what you're interested in. And so the career counselors who use the planned happenstance encourage their clients to find places to meet and interact with people who share their interests and values and see what happens. So, um, so, so Crumbold's found a way to narrow the gap, or to get his academic theory into practice, but a lot of the other academics struggle with that. The other people that figured it out, ironically, were the trait and factor people, because there was a guy named John Holland who developed what's called Holland's occupational codes. And what he did is he created a classification or a framework to organize the job market into classifications of interests. And it's actually built on the trait and factor model. So I was talking about the strong interest inventory earlier. This is what the strong interest inventory uses, Holland codes on the trait and factor. But the rest of the theories I did in the bibliography, you'll see there's I included a book that has extensive explanation of the career counseling theories, and then I did a blog. There's a blog posting that goes through some of the more popular career counseling theories to see what appeals to you. But what I found in my own practice is that the theories that have been the most helpful to me are actually counseling and psychology theories rather than career counseling theories. So I still love Carl Rogers, even if I had to adapt what he did to add in the informational piece. I still think Eric Erickson was very helpful because he talks about life stages. And one of the things that that I see with my clients, is that what worked for them in their 20s doesn't necessarily work in their 30s or 40s or 50s. And so a lot of the changes are in the area of developmental psychology. Their self-image has evolved, their sense of themselves, and their needs and values have changed. So I think that a developmental perspective is very helpful. And if you work with a lot of clients in their 20s, I think you'll find the new developmental life stage that Jeff Arnett calls labeled emerging adulthood to be particularly helpful. So I don't know if how many of the schools are teaching about emerging adulthood yet, but it's kind of important. What he said is that because of the longer lifespans that we have and the complexity of the job market, that there's a new life stage that he calls emerging adulthood that's between adolescence and young adulthood proper. And it's usually in your 20s, and it's characterized by a lot of exploration and experimentation and trying different things. And so when you see with young people, like you'll see they've had 4 or 5 jobs in like 3 or 4 years, and still don't exactly know what they want to do. And like their parents are often very frustrated with this because they feel like they should have figured it out by now. But in truth, if you understand this career stage, which is a prolonged period of exploration, you realize that this is normal now for this age and this time. So even though it may not be the way your parents chose their careers, if they did have careers, it's very normal and not just normal, but like it makes sense to try different things because the job market is constantly changing and it's very complicated. And I encourage people to try different things. So I think educating yourself about emerging adulthood, especially if you work with people in their 20s, is helpful. And then the other thing that I like, which hasn't quite caught on in the career counseling field yet, but related to the emerging adulthood, there also is a design thinking approach to career decision making. And I think there's an interesting little story that goes with this. There are these two professors at Stanford named Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, who were teaching. They helped create the mouse, right? So they're design engineers, and they were teaching design thinking in the design school, and they noticed that a lot of their students were like agonizing over what career were they going to choose like for the rest of their lives. And they were like just agonizing over the decision. And they realized that they needed to think more in design thinking terms, because design thinking is about building a prototype, testing it out, and then coming back, see what worked and what didn't work, and then do another prototype. So the prototypes are like little experiments, right? Like take a class, see if you like it, volunteer for something, see how it works for you. So what they decided to do is they decided to create a class called Designing Your Life, using design thinking for life design. And they offered it for credit in the design school. And it became the most popular undergraduate class at Stanford. There was a waiting list. Students were teaching the process to each other, right? Because it made sense to them. So two things happened out of that. One is the career services people are like, what is happening here? Right? They're in our space, right? And they're getting all the people and they're in our space. So they developed, so the Burnett and Evans class was for juniors and seniors because it was transitioning into the job market. But so the career services people developed what they call the Designing Your Stanford course for freshmen and sophomores. And so what they were teaching them is how to use their education as a way to figure out what careers made the most sense for them. So try different classes, take different activities, and actually be intentional with your college career about learning what and getting exposure to different things that can put you in a better position to make the decision. And then Burnett and Evans are like, well, why are we limiting ourselves to college students? Like everyone could use this. And so they wrote this book called Designing Your Life and Your Work. And they use design thinking to help people make career changes. And I recommend this often to my clients, possibly because in the very first chapter, they say, following your passion is a dysfunctional career belief. Like, okay, finally. The reason they say that is because it stops people from making decisions. And it also assumes that there's one right career path, whereas there isn't necessarily. Like, you don't have to find your calling, right? There could be a number of paths that could make sense for you. And one of the things that I tell my clients is if they're having trouble deciding between two equally viable paths, they should do a job search in both and see what how the job market responds, and let the job market tell them which one's the most feasible for them. If all things being equal, like if they really can't decide and they like both equally, then let the job market decide, because there isn't one right answer. So, and then the other thing that they say is that they replace the follow your passion with follow your energy. So you may see they have influenced my thinking, because I encourage my clients to follow their energy and see what energizes them. And when you find what energizes you, then you're naturally motivated from that inside out. The last topic is about the relationship between career counseling and psychotherapy. And the I have two thoughts about this. One is, because I'm trained as a traditional psychotherapist, I have a bias toward that training, because I feel like it allows me to create rapport pretty quickly with my clients. And I mean, I think, from your own training, it teaches you listening and empathy. And that works really well with career counseling clients, because they know right away you're not judgmental, you're on their side, you're just there to help. And so I find that ability, that the counseling skills that I learned in graduate school have been very helpful. The other piece is, when I was in graduate school, I loved studying psychopathology. And so when clients come in, I don't diagnose, but I can recognize when there's a mental health issue or challenge. And my general feeling about this is, if there's a mental health issue that is impinging on our process, so it's career related, or it's impacting motivation or curiosity or whatever, we will deal with that in the career counseling, because I feel I'm equipped and trained to do that. If it's not really impinging on the process, but it is a life problem, I will encourage them to talk to their therapist about it, or to refer them to a therapist. And in some cases, I will get permission to talk to their therapist, so that we can coordinate and make sure that we're on the same page. So I personally have found the training invaluable, but not always, sometimes directly and sometimes indirectly. Okay, I'm going to stop there and take your questions. Hopefully you have some.
Arlene, I really like how you covered and just, you hit every topic and just summarize the field in a whole. Because I think most of the activities that they've had for this semester, around theory and the career counseling intake and all of those things, I think one of the things that can be challenging is just, how do they piece it together, and what does that look like when they're actually working with clients? So I really like how you covered that.
Yeah, thank you.
And summarized it for them. But I believe there are some questions in the chat. I'm not sure if you're able to see the chat.
I cannot. So
Okay.
maybe you could read them to me.
Yeah, I could start. So the first question is, actually, I'll have the person. Okay, yeah. So the first question is from Tina. She wants to know, how long is the process of career counseling usually? Is it generally longer with the younger population that is just starting out, or longer with clients who are older and making a career change? The younger group would certainly need more help with resume building and learning how to network, but the older group may have more deep complications. And I just wonder if one takes longer to counsel typically. So I think maybe Tina might elaborate on that question if you need her to break it down, but.
Where's Tina? I don't see her on my screen.
Yeah, I was just
There you are.
wondering about like if there tended to be longer that it took to counsel like people who are like kind of just starting out in their careers, or people that are making career changes, because I could see like
Yeah.
that both might have like different aspects that would be difficult with that particular group, because like if you're just starting out, you don't really know anything about the career world. but also if you're making a career change, you may have a lot of things that you might want to go through to figure out what would be a good fit for a change that you're making in your life. And I
Yeah.
didn't know if one of them just, if there was a difference in the amount of time that the career counseling process takes.
So I wouldn't tie it to age. I would tie it to the individual. Some people need more help than other people. And so, and the kind of help they need is different. So with young people, so generally speaking, the process is 5 to 8 sessions. But some people just come for 1 or 2 sessions, and I have a couple of people been with me 5 years. I know them pretty well. So some people are like, what are you talking about for 5 years? Like, you get to know them, right? But so I would say with young people in their 20s, two things happen that I think is worth noting. One is sometimes we run out of things to talk about because they don't have a lot of experience. And so in some cases, I have shortened their sessions to half an hour. So a true career counseling session is a real hour. It's not a therapy hour. It's a real hour. But sometimes they can't sit still for an hour. So we'll shorten the sessions, but we'll meet more often. And but the other thing that I have found with young people is I can almost predict, it's like a little game I play with myself. Now they're going to tell me what their parents think they should do, right? I'm almost always right. Not bragging or anything, but I can tell when the parents have entered the room. And so because in many cases, they're close to their parents and they want to follow their parents' advice, but like their parents' advice isn't making sense to them. So we have to, when I was talking about like if something is impinging on their decision, we have to stop and talk about it. We have to talk about what would it mean to disappoint your parents with your choice? Like, and what would it mean to take responsibility for the choice you make with the possibility it might not be right and that your parents might say, I told you so, right? So like we have to stop, right? And we have to talk about what that would mean because the people in their life who are the most important to them may have a different idea about what they should do. So my client who's been with me for 4 years, I mean, now he's in his 30s, he was in his 20s when we started. His parents have wanted him to go to graduate school from day one. And he doesn't want to. And so every time he gets stuck, right, he's like, my parents say we have the money for graduate school, we should go to graduate school, but I don't want to go to graduate school. So like we've had the same fight, right? I mean, I haven't, but he has been having the same fight with himself. So there's often a family component involved. Now that's also true with older people, but with young people especially, I find this. And sometimes the parents call first before the young people call. So sometimes the parents call and say they're looking for something for their son or daughter or some career counseling, and the parents are going to pay for it. So this introduces a complicating factor. So one thing I tell the parents is that I may bill you, but I don't report to you. And the other thing that I tell the young person is I'm not telling your parents what we talk about. It's up to you to tell your parents what you talk about. So what we talk about is between us. I have brought parents in. I've had parents come in and some parents have been very unhappy with me, I must say, because they want me to support what they want them to do. And I want the young person to decide for themselves what makes sense. Um, so that can stretch things out. And then the job search can also be complicated. With older folks, the issues are a little bit different. Often they have families and people that they're supporting, and sometimes those people don't want them to make a change. So, because they're attached to the lifestyle that they have, and they're worried about that the change, how it will impact their lifestyle. And also, I think you'd be surprised sometimes with the middle-aged folks who are changing careers. They don't actually know as much about the job market as you might think they do, because they've actually been working in the same field or with the same company for most of their lives, and they don't have a good sense of it either. So I didn't really answer your question, but I think my answer is it depends on the person.
Okay, so then I don't know, Christine, if you wanted to add anything else to.
No, that was super helpful though. I feel like I got a lot out of kind of hearing you kind of talk through what it can be like and the things that come up with the younger versus older people, and just the fact that it is really more about the individual, I think is very important to keep in mind. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
So there's another question from Cheyenne. She wants to know, since online job applications get a low response rate, what other recommendations do you give to clients for finding a job? I know some people who have gone to businesses in person and got a submit your application online response. Thank you. So
They did get a response?
no,
from
so when
online?
Cheyenne, I'll let you elaborate on your question.
Hi, yeah. So it was just when they did go in person, they were just
Yeah.
told to submit your application online.
I see. Okay. Yeah. So this is one thing that actually has not changed in all the 40 years I've been a career counselor, which is that networking is still the best way to find a job. And so you don't just show up. You have to find a way to identify people who are working in the places that interest you, and reach out to them. So your network can be, I happen to be a big fan of LinkedIn, because I think LinkedIn allows you to make connections with people you could not otherwise meet. And in that middle space where you're doing the career exploration, where I was talking about the primary and the secondary research, the primary research is talking to people who work in fields that interest you. So what I would do is use LinkedIn to identify people who are working in places that interest you, and then connect with them and ask if you can do an informational interview. And then when it comes time to do the job search, you have the beginning of a network in place already. Right. So you can go back to those people and say, I've made a decision. I think that this is a really good field for me. I'm getting ready to do the job search. Any ideas about who I might talk to? Or can you recommend someone I should talk to? And you network your way in. The other thing you can do is, like, if you see a job posting for a position that you're interested in, right? Go ahead and apply. You can go ahead and apply online, but don't stop there. So then what you want to do, again, go to LinkedIn, put in the name of the company, and then there's a thing that says people. You hit the people thing, and then all the people working at that company who are on LinkedIn will come up, and then find someone that you would like to talk to, that you have something in common with, and invite them to connect to your network and tell them why you want to talk to them. Right. So because with networking, a lot of people say, well, I don't really know anyone. Right. And I say, it's not who you know, it's who you can meet. And you don't have to use LinkedIn. I mean, if you're more comfortable with other social media, use other social media. That's just the one I like, because it's all professional, or supposed to be all professional. But you have to be kind of creative about the networking piece. And a lot of my clients, I would say, will tell you they hate networking. and they don't want to do it. And I say, let's find a way to make it tolerable. So you can't avoid it, but you can do it in a qualitative way that that is targeting specific people, or start, if you're comfortable talking to people you know, start with the people you know, tell them what kinds of people or roles you're interested in, and sort of recruit people to help you. So don't avoid the online postings, but use them in a smart way. Okay,
Perfect. Helps a lot. Thank you.
thanks for the question.
Okay, and then we have 2 questions from Shaban. The first one is, do you include retirement planning as part of services with older clients? Has it ever been requested? And then the other question that she asked was, how are financial concerns addressed in choosing a career? So I don't know if I just thought I'd throw them in there because I know you like to summarize them all, so.
So Shaban has money on her mind.
Um, yeah, especially I think with career changers, you mentioned like their families not wanting them to start over and things like that. So I was wondering, is, retirement planning, or, planning for retirement, I should say, not necessarily financial planning, but if someone is changing careers at especially middle age, that might be a concern of theirs. So I was wondering, how does that show up?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So like if you look at the traditional view of what career counseling is, they stop at retirement. But this is another thing that has changed, which is that like some people want to continue working, but a lot of older people don't want to work in the same capacity. So in terms of retirement planning, I think the question becomes, can you afford to retire? How much longer do you want to work doing what you're doing? And then what the transition will look like. So this is actually on the mind of my entire peer group, like most of whom have already retired. Some people retired and they decided they didn't like it and they went back to work. Some people are, I think a lot of people are transitioning into different kinds of roles. So a lot of times with older people, they like coaching and mentoring and teaching roles, less managing people. So they want something less high powered, but something that builds on their wisdom and experience. So absolutely. And I've written quite a few articles about what companies can do to retain their more talented baby boomers. And one of the things that they can do is offer them roles they actually want. Right. So yes. So I mean, what we have is like there's 5 generations in the job market now. And but there's a labor shortage. And so the traditional retirement age doesn't necessarily hold for everyone. Some people are retiring early and some people want to stay in later. So but we also, with that population, we have to address age bias and how when you do your job search, how you anticipate the age bias that you're going to encounter and build into your, the way that you do your job search, you build in counter narratives about the stereotypes. So you're not sick, how long you're planning to work, you present with energy, so that none of the things that they think an older person would make them not qualified. Just you're showing up the way you show up counters the bias.
Yeah, that was helpful.
Okay, and then we have the last questions from Dina. Dineta is wanting to know, in your experience, what are some common challenges that individuals face when exploring or transitioning careers, and how would you typically address them? So that's the first part of the question.
Okay.
And then I know we only have 5 minutes, so I'm going to throw the last piece in there because I think it could also be answered with the first one.
Okay.
How do you stay updated on current trends and developments in the job market? How does this inform your counseling approach? So they're like a few kind of pieces to the puzzle.
Okay. Okay, so with the challenge of the career transition is that I think I mentioned before, people don't want to start over. And so we're looking for identifying transferable skills, but also we're identifying something called motivated skills. And so again, we're coming back to the whole energy thing, whereas like people find that through the years, they become competent at developing skills that they don't really even like using anymore. And so we start separating their skill set into the ones that are motivated, that give them energy, from the ones that deplete them. And then we begin to reformulate how to build as many of their motivated skills into their career choice as possible to help them stay motivated. The challenge is really the people, how to develop a new vocabulary around a different field, because sometimes, I mean, I have a client right now, his whole career is in classical archaeology and he doesn't want to be in academia anymore. So like this guy's really good with foreign languages, but like he cannot speak the language of business. It's like, to him, it's like he could speak Japanese would be easier than the language of business for him. So, so we look at those things and how to teach them how to understand how the things they know how to do fit in other career fields. The other piece that we'll end on, because this is one of my favorite things about career counseling and the reason I still like it after all these years. I love learning about the job market, which is constantly changing. And so I do, with my clients, I do what I call side-by-side research. So we come up with a list of things of possible fields, but I don't just leave them out there on their own. I also do some research. And sometimes in the research I do, I will identify other areas or fields that I wasn't really familiar with that would make sense for them. And so I'm always finding new things in the job market. And now, like, there's a bunch of job titles. They show up all the time that, like, so all of a sudden, like, there's a job called Chief Hybrid Officer. Like, because since the pandemic, all these companies are hybrid. Now they have a new C-suite job. And like, when did personnel become human resources? And now it's not even human resources anymore. It's like chief people officers. And there's like directors of employee experience and like just job titles that didn't exist 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But then all of a sudden you see them popping up all over the place. And so I think one of the reasons that people would come to me is because of that question about, you know, what's out there. And like, if I don't know what's out there, I'm going to find out. So, because I like that part. And I think it keeps the dynamism of the job market. But one of the things that keeps it exciting.
Tina, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
You sure?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Well, we are at our time mark, so I want to make sure that I'm being respectful of everyone's time. Thank you so much, Arlene, for taking the time this morning to come in and speak with us. I know you've got a pretty busy schedule, and I, just love how committed you are to helping to keep the next generation of career counselors
Right.
engaged, or at least trying to get them
Recruit them.
interested in the field.
I know, right? Yeah, right.
I think most of the students in the class are kind of mixed about, I don't know if I'm going to do this. I don't know,
Yeah.
so it's always nice to kind of hear
Yeah.
different perspectives and people in the field. So I definitely appreciate it. So we'll stop here for today. And for any of you guys, if you have any questions, I'm going to hang on for a little longer. If you have any questions about the assignments or anything like that. But other than that, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, morning. Your Saturday,
Thank
go
you.
back to bed and do whatever.
Nice meeting everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, I'm staying on a second because I just wanted to see if you were able to ever open that one presentation.
Okay, you know what? Since I have you on here, let me go in there and see. I haven't actually looked at it.
Yeah, because I was thinking if not, I could just like share my screen or something and do it that way. But
Get your
I do
points
think
in, aren't you?
it's on the share drive thing though, so I think the movie version should work.
Hold on, I need to stop this recording.
Oh, sorry.
I completely forgot.